Hi, welcome to Nutshell Recap. Enid was sniffing Glunn's back, making him uncomfortable all over. Now back to the story. Enid told him that what he could tell from its smell was that it contained malicious intent, and it also had the smell of the West. Hearing it, Glunn asked him if Mana had a different smell depending on where it came from. Enid smelled again, which made Glunn very embarrassed. He told him that it was correct. Every land has mana that is unique to its origin, and they all have distinctive smells. The person who had cast the curse on him should be someone from the West, judging from the fact that he could smell both the stench and the West. Glunn also agreed because it seemed to align with the things that he had speculated so far. The eastern continent was a land with a low mana reservoir. It was a difficult place to produce strong magic spells. So if it was a person who could cast that type of complex spell, it was likely to be a person from a different continent. Enid showed him the spell on the paper and stated that this circle seemed to be related to time. He had been working on spells related to time recently, which was to find his future spouse. Well, he didn't tell him that, but he told him about some familiar formulas within that circle he had found. Enid was speculating and mumbled if it was something related to rewinding time. Hearing it, Glunn was shocked internally. So, he asked in a roundabout way what would happen if someone was affected by it. Enid replied that if it were to affect him, then he might lose all his alchemy skills. If the curse was activated to rewind the time that he had spent on learning alchemy. After saying that, Enid was surprised because that sounded very scary. Glunn looked at him while thinking that he didn't seem to know exactly what it did, or maybe he was pretending not to know. Even though Enid was a genius in his own right, it wasn't easy for him to think out of the box. Spells related to time cannot be used on tangible objects. It was a widely accepted knowledge for alchemists, and for him to accept the fact that the man in front of him could turn into a little boy was something he could not acknowledge. Enid was also peeking at Glunn, thinking what could have been turned back for this man. But the problem was, who was this person in the first place? Looking at his rough hand and body, he could be a swordsman, or it could be that he lost the ability to handle swords. That explained why he was so desperate. Well, Enid's mind was totally in the wrong direction. Come to think of it, he didn't even know his name yet. So he approached him and introduced himself that his name was Enid, and if he could tell him his. Glunn was instinctively going to say his name was Glunn, but he changed it to Grow at the last moment. He glanced at him, thinking that if he had been contacted by them, he would show some kind of sign. Even if he was not, the name Grow was easy to use because it was a commonly used name in Chelsea. Enid chuckled hearing the name Grow while Grow was vigilant if Enid had caught it or not. Enid smiled and told him that he would get rid of his curse, though it might take some time. Enid grinned internally because he guessed that he must be a very highly ranked noble trying to hide his identity using this common name Grow. He planned it so beautifully that he would pretend like it was a very difficult job, and he would extort some money out of this. The more difficult it looked, the more gold he would pay him. Enid showed his signature smile and told him to pay whatever amount he seemed fit after he got rid of the curse. Grow agreed. Then Enid offered that they should head to the town first. He had to collect the bounty, and he would get him some clothes with that money too. He was thinking that little money for clothes wouldn't be much. It was all an investment for his bright future. While they were roaming in the town street, everybody was looking at Grow's body with full of envy. Well, his body was well shaped. This type of body is every man's dream. On the other hand, Enid was getting uncomfortable because everybody was staring at Grow. He looked in those people's direction, and from Enid's perspective, all of them were looking like a pervert. He instinctively covered him and told him that the store was in that direction. Anyway, Enid was very protective of his man. But this was weird. Why he was the one who felt uncomfortable. When they reached the shop, Enid chose too many clothes and stated that he would take all of them. The shopkeeper was very happy. Well, which shopkeeper wouldn't be? Enid paid the money thinking that he would get his bounty today anyway. At that moment, Grow came back all dressed up. Enid turned around and looked at him. The big shirt covered most of his upper body, and the pants were so wide that his leg lines didn't show. Enid was very satisfied and gave it a thumbs up. But Grow was feeling a bit stuffy. But Enid hurriedly stopped him and told him that it looked perfectly fine. Enid grinned, feeling satisfied. He was not sure why he felt so much better now, but it was a good feeling. When they came to the security office, the officers didn't give his bounty. On the contrary, they asked him if he was really the one who caught those slave merchants himself. Enid replied confidently that it was him only, and he had told them everything yesterday. But that officer scoffed at him and told him not to take others as fools. He argued that it wasn't him who had caught those slave merchants, but the Lord. It was the Lord's soldiers who caught them on behalf of his order. And he had been rebuked for filing a false report last night, only because of him. Enid was shocked hearing this. He told that officer word by word that it was he who caught them, but that officer didn't hear him at all. He was mumbling that he knew something smelled fishy when Enid told him yesterday that he took out 3 men by himself. Enid was also not going to back down. He countered that the man he came here with yesterday could testify to him. Hearing it, the officer scolded him more vigorously. That man said it was the Lord's soldier as well. Enid couldn't believe this. How could they twist the truth and betray their consciousness easily? His tightened fist was trembling. There was no way. He shouted that he had another witness. The officer arrogantly huffed. Enid shouted that the kid, who was with him yesterday, he would find him and bring him back here. Seeing him so agitated, Grow squeezed his shoulder to calm him down and then told him that he needed to talk to him for a second. Please like and subscribe. When they came outside, Enid asked him what he wanted to talk here. Did he also think that he was lying? Grow firmly replied that he believed him. He brought him out because talking to the officer wouldn't solve anything. Hearing it, Enid wanted to counter him, but he knew that Grow was correct. He became silent for a moment, thinking that Grow was probably right. If the Lord decided to claim the reward himself, there was nothing he could do. Enid agreed, but he couldn't believe it. He grumbled that what kind of noble wanted to steal a bounty of money from a commoner, as if the Lord was so deprived of money. Grow explained that it wouldn't be for money. The men he caught weren't just regular slave merchants. Hearing it, Enid was puzzled, so he asked what he meant by that. Grow continued that among the men he had caught was a man who the king had personally placed a bounty on. It was known that the current king was eager to root out the slave problem in the kingdom. So, the king had placed a bounty on high-ranked criminals of the slave trafficking organization, and Enid had happened to catch one of them. Enid listened carefully and deduced that the Lord must be aiming to build a political stance out of that. It was a shame. If he had known it earlier, this could have been an opportunity for him as well. Thinking that, Enid tightened his fist. Seeing him silent, Grow asked him if he was giving up. Enid smiled wryly that there was nothing he could do against a noble. But Grow was not satisfied. He leaned closer to him and stated that there was a way. The potion he used to put those slave merchants to sleep, didn't they make ones which affect sleep until they die unless they were given an antidote? Enid replied that they did, but then remembered that Grow shouldn't have known what happened that day, so he asked how he knew all of that. Grow was startled, but then composed himself, and replied that he came here to look for him. So he heard about what he did while gathering information. Enid nodded and was quite convinced because it did make some news. He wondered how news spreads quickly in a small town like this. Here, Grow sighed in relief. He was thankful that Enid didn't pose so many questions otherwise. Anyway, Grow suggested to Enid that since the slave merchants were not waking up, the Lord would have guessed that something was not right by now. He would soon come for him, because he couldn't let those slave merchants die. Enid became hopeful again after hearing it. He agreed with Grow that if the criminals died or rotted, by the time they were taken to the capital, those corpses wouldn't be identifiable. Grow outrightly told him that when the Lord would ask him for the antidote, he should bargain. Enid didn't get it first. So Grow explained that he should ask them for gold in exchange for the antidote. The Lord wasn't after the money anyway, but Enid had a clear mind about this. It was easy to say. He probably would end up handing them over the antidote without getting any penny. Grow interrupted him and stated that he would help him. Enid was surprised to hear this, but Grow assured him that he shouldn't worry and just trust him. He would get him what he wanted. Enid thought for a moment and then asked him if that was really possible. Then what he wants in return. Grow hid his emotions and stated that he wanted nothing, which was very puzzling to the alchemist. Grow held Enid by his shoulder and said to him that he had promised to get rid of his curse, so he was just granting it as one of the payments he had to give. He tapped his shoulder to assure him that the Lord would send someone within the night at the latest. They would have to be present. Enid had not expected that Grow would help him that way. Then they started their journey to the home. Well, Enid was quite relieved thinking that it didn't feel that bad to get help from him. Please like and subscribe for more. See you guys in the next video. Have a good day ahead. Bye.